Good morning, Indiana. Welcome to Who's Left This Week, the Sunday news and politics show for the Hoosier State without the MAGA BS. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers. I'm broadcasting from Bloomington this morning. Hope you've all had a fine weekend. Let's go ahead and welcome in my panel. There's Brandon Clark. Brandon Clark from Social Society YouTube, and you got a Substack too. What's the Substack called, Brandon?
It is the People's Pulse. You can find it at socialsociety.com.
Love it. Thank you, sir. Let's see who else we got there. Hey, there's Christopher Maichin. He was my guest on this week's Who's Left podcast, a formidable young Republican who will be playing the role of reverse Jessica Tarlov with us this morning. How you doing, Chris?
I'm great. Great to be here. Thanks, Scott.
Glad to have you. And finally, welcome back to the show, 2026 Indiana Secretary of State candidate Blythe Potter. Blythe, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Glad to have you all this morning. Looking forward to this discussion. First, let's look at the headlines in the U.S. this week before we get to the stories we're going to look at a little deeper. Earlier this week, Donald Trump started his trade war back up. It's on again, it's off again, it's on again, it's off again. This week, it's on again. Trump sending letters to dozens of U.S. trading partners informing them that they could soon face tariffs ranging from 25 to a whopping 50%, including 35% on our biggest partner, Canada. Related to that, he threatened Brazil with 50% tariffs because his buddy, former far-right wannabe dictator Jair Bolsonaro, is being tried for inciting a coup there. Hey, Brazil, that's how it's done. Also this week, Elon Musk's Grok AI goes full Mecha Hitler. Apparently, he updated the algorithm, some say personally, last weekend, instructing the chatbot, quote, not to shy away from making claims which are politically incorrect as long as they are well substantiated, end quote. By Tuesday, Grok was defending Hitler, calling itself Mecha Hitler, and going on anti-Semitic rants. On Wednesday, perhaps related, perhaps not, ex-CEO Linda Yaccarino resigned from the company. Also this week, Mahmoud Khalil, the Columbia University graduate student and Palestinian activist who was detained for 3 months, filed a $20 million lawsuit against the Trump administration. Measles have reached a 33-year high in the United States after having been declared eliminated in the year 2000. FBI Director Kash Patel is apparently polygraphing agents to see if they ever said anything bad about him. Newsflash, Kash, if you're a boss, your employees have probably said something bad about you. And finally, TikTok perhaps is creating an American-only version ahead of a potential sale. That is something I think we're going to look at a little bit later down the line if they go through with it. I know, Blythe, that would really hit you hard. You use a lot of the TikTok, and very well, I might add.
Thank you.
But first, our first headline story this morning: ongoing fallout from last week's deadly Texas floods. More than 100 people have died, and more than 100 are still missing. The big story this week is basically who's to blame. Democratic Texas Representative Lloyd Doggett, who represents the Austin area, said, I believe there have been failures at every level of government, from the county to the state and the federal. And he said that to Ali Velshi on MSNBC. Before I get into some details, I did want to ask you guys, is it appropriate to be assigning blame when there are still folks missing, when we're still doing like search and recovery efforts? Chris, what do you think?
You know, I think it's extremely easy to blame whoever is in power wherever for any like disaster in general, but at the end of the day, this was a natural disaster. It's not something that politically we could have controlled, right? But I still do think that we need to have some sort of accountability in terms of why the alert system didn't go off like earlier than it did, things like that. So I think right now it should be more focused on the search and rescue missions, being able to find those missing peoples, being able to, allow these grieving families who don't know where their family members even may be, to have some closure, some solace from this all. But at the same time, I think people do need to be held to account for the lack of a warning of it. But I also think that politicians left and right now can't be blaming each other, and this is a huge humanitarian mission that needs to bring us together right now. And I hope that that's what it goes into. It doesn't look like it is, because it's going to get politicized, and it's very easy to politicize something that you can't control, and that's oftentimes what happens. But no, I think that right now it should be focused on the humanitarian mission, supporting our law enforcement, supporting the people who are going in and trying to find these kids, and the scuba divers that are going through the miles and miles of murky water trying to find the bodies of these people. I think that's who we need to be supporting right now. That's who I think we need to put our focus on. And after everything subsides, after we're able to find all of the victims, lay them to rest, I think we need to do a full investigation on, why this alert system and this warning system didn't, happen sooner.
Yeah, and I'll say, it is. We could debate when it's appropriate to talk about this, but it is certainly appropriate to demand accountability from elected officials and to place blame on them when they messed up.
Mm-hmm.
I did see some folks on the online left and center saying things like, well, Texas deserved this because they voted for Trump.
Exactly.
Blythe, what do you think about stuff like that?
Nobody deserves this, even if they voted for it, but we are going to place blame on Texas politicians. This is a known floodplain. They knew, and they have known for well over 10 years, that this was going to happen. It has been documented. Counties just like mine in Johnson County very intentionally declined federal tax dollars, our own tax dollars coming back to us to help us in some capacity, because it was from Joe Biden. So yes, the county officials are to blame. So are the constituents who urged them to not keep that money or to not use it the way it was intended. There is blame to be placed here. Now, does Mother Nature happen? Yes, she does. She's quite the jerk sometimes. That cannot be helped. But a lot of things went wrong. There were some not great systems in place that could have prevented this, but it lies solely on the county to start. And then it's going to have to go up the chain to the elected officials in Washington, who have not only defunded this, but have how long did Kristi Noem drag her feet? A couple days? Like, there are people to blame. Now, blaming the people who have been gaslit and lied to by their elected officials for voting them in to only have this happen, we can kind of say, well, we tried to tell you this, which we did. We, as in anyone who was against this. But algorithms have kept us from being heard as logical sources of information to the right on purpose. So then we can also go and blame Meta, TikTok, and all these other places that are suppressing this information that we have literally been screaming about from Project 2025 for over a year. So no, I don't blame the voters, but yes, I do blame the politicians.
Brandon, I wanted to look at some of the failures at the federal level here. So apparently the National Weather Service has lost close to 600 staff at a time when 40% of NWS offices are already facing staff vacancies. The one for Austin and San Antonio, which covers the areas affected by this event. The Trump Doge layoffs included a warning coordination meteorologist that played a critical role in the communication coordination between the forecasters and the emergency managers and the public. So there was somebody who was supposed to be in this office who could have done something in this storm wasn't there prior to this week's past weekend's events. The National Weather Service had been warning about the rains and potential for flash floods for days, but a few of the key local positions had been vacant since the first round of Doge cuts and buyouts. Brandon, it sounds like you could put a direct line from Trump and Musk and their willy-nilly chainsaw cuts to this event.
Yeah, you can. I do want to say my heart goes out to anyone who is experiencing themselves directly or their family. You know, that's 100 or so families that will never be the same again. I think both things can be true, though, that this is a tragedy. This is a natural disaster. This is something where we should be focusing on the ground, on search and rescue. But we can also be talking about what went wrong as to not let this continue happening going forward. The cuts, we probably shouldn't be cutting things like the NOAA. We probably shouldn't be cutting things like the National Weather Service. They stand for emergencies just like this. Obviously, if you have less hands on deck to deal with an emergency, you're going to be less able to deal with that emergency. I think that's simple logic. So why would we be taking people out of these positions like the coordinator you spoke to, where, I mean, you can't say, obviously, this wouldn't have happened if they were in that role, but it would have helped, right? Maybe even if it's only incremental, if it's one or two more lives that would have been saved, that's one or two more families forever who would have not been affected by this, right? And then I think the other side that needs talked about is how climate change plays an effect on this and how denial of climate change is really dangerous. Whereas like in Biden's infrastructure bill, he signed billions of dollars into law to address this exact type of flooding, and states like Texas, they blocked 10 million of that, largely because of lies spewed by Ted Cruz, by Donald Trump, where we should probably follow science and not politicians. And in that sentiment, I would agree that we absolutely shouldn't politicize things like science. We should accept that climate change is real. Climate change causes things like this to happen, and we should be doing everything in our power to address it.
Yeah, and governors like Ron DeSantis in Florida and Greg Abbott here in Texas do deny climate change, and they try to excise it from their state governments even talking about it. So if you pretend it doesn't exist, you can't prepare for things like this that happen downstream of climate change. Greg Abbott said, and I love this quote, he says, "Who's to blame? Know this. That's the word choice of losers." Let me explain one thing about Texas. That is, Texas, every square inch of our state cares about football. High school football, Friday Night Lights, college football, or pro. Every football team makes mistakes. The losing teams are the ones who try to point out who is to blame. The championship teams are the ones who say, "Don't worry about it, man. We got this. We're going to make sure that we go score again, and we're going to win the game." The way winners talk is not to point fingers. They talk about solutions. Chris, Monday after the game, they go watch tape, don't they?
Well, sorry, they go watch what?
I mean, football players after a loss, Monday they'll go watch tape and they'll see where they made mistakes.
I play lacrosse, even after a practice, we're watching tape on what we're doing and how to be able to improve. So it's more of the time it's internally of like, okay, how do I fix what we did? If I'm on the losing side of something, you could say one, they were a lot better than we were, or two, we didn't have our game plan down. We weren't prepared to be able to handle what they were going to give to us. And that's the same thing within politics itself. But I think also on that point too, is like in the, increased politicization of all of this, it's important for elected officials at times like this, no matter any side of the aisle, when there is a major disaster, is to go and be with the people in their time of need. So I have to give President Trump credit for going down to Texas to be able to see the flood sites, to see the flood victims within less than 2 weeks of it happening. I mean, when we had the train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, Biden didn't go for over a year to be.
He had no reason to be there.
But at the same time, but it doesn't matter, because
yes,
at
it
the
does.
same time, if there is a crisis that's happening that so many people are affected by, just the president's presence in that place shows that they care about those people.
Nope. It does not. It shows that they do not care about what they are doing by being there, because they have to completely halt and modify their emergency structure that is in place. And I know this firsthand, you cannot argue it. When he went to East Palestine, that actually created more problems for the people trying to clean it up. Because do you know what happens when you bring Secret Service and the president in? You have people doing advance work, clearing people out, just like we saw at JD Vance at Disney. And then you have people on the back end, and they have to change everything. They literally had to take people out of churches and shelters to bring them in. So no. Their job is to oversee and make sure it gets cleaned up, not to go to a destruction zone and be like, hey, yo, I'm here. I'm doing this. No.
When you're the president of the United States and you are representing all Americans, no matter where they are. And
leaders do not have to be there in person to lead.
I just want to say quickly,
by showing up, that shows their leadership and that they care about the people. And at the same time, those people feel the comfort that, okay, my president cares about me. My president's coming here because of a disaster that happened under their watch. They need to come. They need to be transparent. They need to show up and be with the people in their time of need.
Yeah, and I think. Okay, hold on, real quick. I think you support people through action, not through optics. And I think if you ask people on the ground, would they rather have Trump there for a photo shoot, or would they rather have the NOA, the NWS fund it, the search and rescue not delayed for 72 hours by Kristi Noem, in the FEMA cuts and all of this? I think that they would weigh the action over the optics there, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's again. I do want to move on. So we don't spend all day on this one. Blythe, you wanted to talk about this guy today. As pictured on the screen for those of you listening, is financier and human trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. What you got, Blythe?
I hope that we make it through this, and someday I can sit down and have enough time to learn the psychology behind all of the nonsense that is happening right now, particularly why this is the hill that far-right Republicans are finally deciding, nope, we're done with this. Like, we've got so much, there are documentaries about the harm that was done by Jeffrey Epstein, not just to children and women, but like literal families and communities were harmed by this terrible person. You like that? I didn't cuss. You're welcome.
Yeah, keep that one in the bag.
And I'm working on it. And on top of that, we've also been told we have these files, we have these client lists. Like, it was very much implied that this was something that was there, which is a little perplexing because we all know that Trump is involved in this, and likely many other politicians on all sides of the aisle and wealthy people. And now suddenly the FBI and DOJ are like, nope, there's no list.
Mm-hmm. Nothing
let's not talk about it.
You know, one of the things about this, like, has the right and the left have been fighting about this Epstein thing, and whenever you bring up Trump, well, I think a lot of folks on the right are like, well, Bill Clinton, Bill Gates, and I mean, me, I don't care about Bill Clinton or Bill Gates. If they're in it, I want to see that too. The hell with them.
You know, going off that point, I think when we're going to get the most clarity on this is when we no longer have 70 and 80-year-old politicians in office, because they were all involved. And like you said, like the Clintons Biden would have released it if Trump was on it and none of the Democrats were. So like, obviously there are so many people involved in this. And because the old people are still holding on to all of the power, it's going to take when the next generation comes in, who's separate from it, who's learned and grown up hearing about the tragedies and the terrible things that Jeffrey Epstein did, is when we're going to get the most clarity on this. But because the people who were involved in it on both sides of the aisle are still in power, we're never going to actually get any clarity on that until they're out of here. And I think, and like going off and like, it was, we're going to release the JFK files, the Epstein files, everything was, the big campaign promise. And like Pam Bondi said, I have the client list on my desk right now waiting for a review. And, when they did the big influencer campaign for, giving out like phase 1 of the Jeffrey Epstein files, which is pretty much what we already had, there's a reason that it said phase 1 on there. So there obviously had to have been a phase 2, whatever going down. And I think after the Trump-Elon feud and then Elon tweeting about Trump being on the Epstein list, they were like, nope, we got to cover it up now. And then you have people like Deputy Director of the FBI, Dan Benigno, right now threatening to leave the administration because of the way that Pam Bondi is handling this. And even there's reports that Kash Patel and Pam Bondi are not on the same side of this, and Kash might even leave if Pam stays. So it's, one or the other. And, Trump just tweeted, he stands with Pam Bondi and everything like that. But, Kash was one of the biggest people talking about, yes, like we're going to find, there's a client list. We're going to release it. We're going to do all of these things before he got in. And the FBI is supposed, and the DOJ are supposed to be separate from, politics and from the executive branch. And clearly it doesn't seem that way right now. And with the lack of public dissent allowed within the Trump administration, it's always going to be like, we're going to pick one person over the other, and then we're going to completely expel the dissenter and the people who, go against it, even if, their thoughts are warranted. So I just think it's terrible. I don't know what's going to happen because either Benigno or Bondi is going to go, and I hope Benigno stays. So I don't know. I guess we'll see what happens, but I don't think we're going to get any clarity on this issue for a couple more years.
I hope there's a whistleblower who decides to just share it all.
Oh, me too. Me too.
All of it. Throw them all under the bus.
Exactly. Everybody. You know what? And maybe we'll actually get some clarity on what politicians are shady and which ones aren't, so we can vote some actual good ones in.
This is the kind of bipartisan agreement I can get behind. Brandon, you wanted to talk about ICE and I'm going to spend mine here. The Gestapo shit they've been up to this week.
Yeah, I think ICE is something that everyone should be worried about, that everyone should be talking about, as in the wake of them now being funded more so than militaries in lots of countries around the world, more so than our FBI, than the ATF, the DEA, numerous agencies that I would think are a lot more useful
combined.
than ICE. In the wake of them getting this funding, we have lawsuits coming out about racial targeting being carried about ICE and what are deemed roving patrols. We have Tom Homan going on Fox News and doubling down on this, saying that ICE only needs reasonable suspicion, whatever that means, stating specifically how people look, how they sound, and what their occupation are enough for ICE to detain people. The lawsuit alleges that agents were picking people out for these reasons. There was even a U.S. citizen that was detained. They were held even after showing their ID, solely because of their accent. Reasonable suspicion. This is where it leads you, as something I've been warning about on my channel. When due process, when rights are being violated, you shouldn't allow people to open that door, because if everyone doesn't have a right, then nobody has that right, because it's only a matter of time or circumstance before you start to lose them. And we're starting to see that with ICE escalating on citizens. They're escalating their budget to bring this nationwide. And I just think that that's something everyone should be concerned about. So I wanted to bring it to the panel for us to discuss.
Yeah, you mentioned a good thing about if they're just scooping up people, right? And they're taking away rights from these folks on the proposition that they are here illegally, but not giving them the due process to prove that they are here legally. Well, all they have to do is say to anybody, well, you're here, you're illegal, and you can scoop them up and send them off to anywhere before they have a chance to prove it. I mean, that
sounds a lot like Jim
American
Crow.
citizens too. It's very familiar, is it not?
Mm-hmm.
It is, and it's putting a lot of people, and I am not siding with anyone who previously worked with ICE, and I'm not saying the military is perfect. However, many people get into these government positions, one, because of lack of other options, two, maybe, there might be a skill set for it, a lot of different reasons. But think about the mental warfare that's going on with the people who, maybe this job keeps their family afloat, and they're like military. They're being given orders that goes directly against the Constitution and the law. They are doing some really terribly traumatic things to the people who are working in these organizations that disagree with what's happening. Now, I think there are a lot of people who are not actually ICE agents. I think that's been well speculated. We've got some rogue people who do want to do this, but
if your face is covered and you don't have a badge number, how do we know?
Exactly. I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. It's terrible.
I saw there was somebody, who impersonated, literally like got their own like armored vest and then like colored in, because like you from police, the word police, you can color in the letters just to have the I, C, and the E on there, going around and trying to like round people up and things, and it's awful, and that is something that we have to vehemently oppose and condemn, and things like that. And Trump campaigned on taking out the criminals that came into our country. And I am totally all for going after criminals, but I also do agree with the due process thing. And I also think that part of, the funding for ICE Homeland Security should have been a lot more funding for judges to be able to actually have more judges available to be able to handle the mass influx of illegal immigrants that we do have in this country. Because under Biden, millions of people came across our border unvetted. We didn't know who was good, who was bad, who was a criminal, who's not, who's trying to come here for a better life for their family, who's trying to come here to hurt America. So we were left with an immense and insane challenge and having to figure out how to be able to do it in a humane way while still being able to be in line with the law, while still being a nation of laws, and saying, you want to be an immigrant in this country, do it the right way, do it the legal way. But I also think with that, just rounding people up and sending them back it's gonna negatively affect our economy, because food service, farmers, everything like that. A lot of it is illegal, migrants that are working there. So I think that these people need to be given, and that's why we need a complete reform of our immigration system, because I am for securing the border. I am for having deterrence but creating more entries for asylum, being able to create that process for people to do it legally, so we can vet them, so they can come into this country. I'm all for that. And at the same time, for the people that are here, once we vet them, once we figure out who the criminals are and everything, let's find a way to get them on a pathway to citizenship. If they're benefiting our country, if they are helping us out, then let's do it. Then there shouldn't be a problem with this. And, about 50%, I saw a stat the other day, 50% are like of the illegal alien immigrants that were rounded up were, violent criminal offense. Like, that's what I agree with. But then there's like a quarter of it that it's like other immigration violations. Like, it's just this broad term that nobody really knows, and it's just like going in and like Blythe was saying, it was like it's there's so much gray area in there that it's so easy for them to go in and round them up and saying, oh, it's another immigration violation, but we're not actually we're not being told why these people are being detained. So I think that the intention from the campaign side of things was good in terms of taking out the criminals, the people who are, coming in, whether it's from the drug cartels, whether it's, people who are coming in murdering, raping people. Those people, should be, still deserve due process, but then should be deported from our country. But the people who are benefiting our country, I think we have to be able to completely have an overhaul of our immigration system to be able to allow for a pathway for citizenship for them.
Well, we tried to do that. There was a bipartisan bill that Trump made go away under Biden. But it was
also Biden could have done it for the first.
I'm not saying Biden was perfect.
Wait. We got to be clear. In 2021, Biden did put forth the U.S. Citizenship Act in his first week, and Republicans said it was dead on arrival and wouldn't vote for it. And that would have put more judges, more lawyers for asylum claims. It would have allowed pathways to citizenship for nonviolent offenders. A lot of the things you mentioned, and Republicans, Marco Rubio, specifically, I remember a lot who were on the Gang of Eight were like, this is dead on arrival. We have to focus on COVID and a lot of other things. So it died in committee.
Yeah, and I remember this every time we've been close on some sort of grand bargain around immigration over the last 15 years, Republicans have spiked it. Brandon, I wanted to give you a chance to sort of tie up this story before we move on to the one Chris wanted to talk about.
Yeah, the last thing I just want to say, because I do think that the detention side of things are important. The numbers that I have of I think it's around 60,000 people that ICE has detained. 43% have no criminal record. Outside of that, there's another around 15% that only have like traffic violations, the immigration violations. So it seems at least the majority aren't violent criminals. I would agree that we should get violent criminals out of the country. But you have to think, when you have stories like Mahmoud Khalil was detained for 104 days. I covered a Palestinian lady. Her name was Ward. She was detained for, I think, 140 days. This costs a lot of money. It's not economically feasible to do this. It also costs a lot of money to do deportation flights. So it's just not really the way that America should be moving. And I could talk about it for 3 hours, but we'll move on for time's sake.
Well, no, I'm glad you brought up the cost of this, because Chris wanted to talk about the one big beautiful bill and the budgetary effects of it. Chris, what you got?
Well, so I think it's, the one big bloated bill. And this is my problem with, omnibus bills in general, is that we don't know, like, these 1,000-page bill that has all this different funding, and we don't know what it's actually talking about. It's like the same thing with Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, which didn't, reduce inflation at all, and had all of these other, Green New Deal initiatives inside of it too. So I'm one big proponent for single issue bills. Like, if we're actually going to be voting on something, we should know what it is. The title should explain it. And, it could be 100 pages, 10 pages, but that's the single issue that we're talking about here. And, my biggest thing forever, I'm a fiscal conservative. We don't have a revenue problem in the United States. We have a spending problem in the United States. And it's our Democrats and Republicans are the ones to blame about this. And I don't agree with, for funding border security, things like that, I agree with. But if you actually look at the numbers surrounding it, we have $46 billion going to the wall. I'm all for finishing the wall, but if you actually do the math and calculate it, it's only going to take $6.5 billion to actually finish the wall. So we're spending $46 billion on that. So where is that other money going? Like, it makes no sense. And even with, DOGE cuts, which weren't included in the bill, which cut around $200 billion, this is still an increase of $300 billion to, the deficit. And it would be $100 billion with the DOGE cuts, but still, like, we're spending the money that we don't have, and that debt is being owned by countries like China. So we have a spending problem in Washington, whether it's Republicans or Democrats. And, Trump came, as, Trump talked about in his, first term, especially, like, we need to be able, like, we have to balance the budget, we have to reduce the deficit. You have to do all of these things, but actively doing things that are going to increase the deficit just because you want to fund your own initiatives doesn't prove that you're a fiscal conservative or that you have true fiscal conservative values. So, I agree with some things in the bill. I don't think that the work requirements for Medicaid are that bad. 20 hours a week, people with disabilities, the elderly, people who are caring for children don't have to. That doesn't apply to them. But I still am very worried about the Medicaid cuts. I'm still worried that, millions of people are going to lose healthcare coverage. But our healthcare system does need to be reformed dramatically in the United States. And there's a lot of different viewpoints on how we need to do that. But yeah, I think we got to get people back into work. We got to get people less reliant on the government and being complicit and things like that. But at the same time, we have to help people. People shouldn't be denied care going to an emergency room because, they're an illegal immigrant or they don't have insurance or things like that. Like, people deserve care. People deserve healthcare. And in a country where we don't have universal healthcare, you can argue if it works, if it doesn't, if it causes longer lines, less actual, not transparency, but access to good doctors, people like that. The reason that we have the best doctors in the world is because people come here because of our healthcare system, because doctors can make a good living and we can continue to innovate, create, and, help people. But at the same time, within the system itself, if you want to have government healthcare, you should work, and you should prove that. And 20 hours a week, 20 hours a week, I don't think is that bad of a thing. But at the same time, it's worrisome because of the amount of money that's being cut from Medicaid. Millions of people are going to lose health insurance coverage. So I think there's an easier way to phase it in, but rather than just doing the cuts right away.
Blythe or Brandon, do you guys want to jump in this before I do? Because I've got thoughts.
First and foremost, we do have a funding problem for the country. It's called billionaires getting welfare. Second of all, we fund Israel's universal health care and Israel's universal education, and no one seems to be complaining about that. So yes, universal health care. I don't understand why education and healthcare and food and housing aren't called human rights. Jesus would have agreed with me. We do have a spending problem, but not to the point that you think it is. And we should have nobody should have access or should have no access to healthcare. And I don't know if you've ever been around an actual Medicaid recipient like I have, of all ages, but telling them you're not working for it when they have literally paid into the system like we have, you and I have paid into this. You should not then be saying, oh, we're going to dangle this like a carrot. You have to go work, even if you cannot. Many people are on Medicaid because
one of the provision is if you can't work, if you have a disability, you're the elderly, you're caring for children, you're a caregiver, it doesn't apply to you. So
yeah, all of these asterisks we know are not like.
How do we know? It's in the bill. That's the law.
Well,
Okay,
the purpose of all of the requirements is to it's not to like weed out people that don't deserve it. It's just to catch people up in red tape.
So
and that's what usually happens. And for the Republican Party that always talks about cutting red tape, they're adding red tape just to make it harder for people that do actually deserve Medicaid to get it. And for the cost of means testing, we can just give it away. It's a waste of money.
But I also, one point that I would like to make is that, one, I wasn't expecting any Medicaid cuts within the big, beautiful bill. I wasn't expecting any Medicaid cuts at all because Trump promised in the general election that we're not going to touch Medicaid. And that wasn't true.
Trump is a liar.
I understand that, but I'm just saying is that, that was a campaign promise, and that's something that he did not follow through on. So,
okay, so
I'll say that to the ends of the earth, and I will call Trump out when it's plausible to call Trump out, and a lot of times it is. But he campaigned on not cutting Medicaid, and now look at what we have.
So the two things I want to touch on with this is, one, the Medicaid thing. This has been tried on state levels, the work requirements, and it's never increased employment, but it has decreased insurance rates, which is a problem. It just seems like an ineffective way to reach the means. I would disagree with the fact that you have to work for Medicaid anyway, but it seems to not even be effective, even if you believe that principle. But the more important part, I have a problem with the not a revenue problem, a spending problem. There's a really good report from the American Progress. I interviewed someone from them, and if not for the Bush era tax cuts, their extensions, which were bipartisan in 2013, both parties supported them, and then Trump's tax cuts in 2017, our revenue would be on track to keep up with spending. Even with all the increases, our debt ratio would also be declining. Tax cuts are responsible for 57% of the increase that we've had in our debt ratio since 2001, about $10 trillion, a little over. And if we exclude the bills that are responding to COVID or the recession from Obama, they'd be responsible for over 90% of the debt ratio. So, and we would, by the way, we would be paying off our debt if not for COVID and the recession and these tax cuts. So it seems like the problem is a revenue problem. It's not necessarily a spending problem. I do agree we recklessly spend. I think we might disagree where the reckless spending is. I think a lot of it's in the Pentagon, not so much in healthcare or whatever. But yeah, we have a revenue problem. And then when in this bill, we have things like defunding the IRS and means to bring more revenue, that in itself is a problem. And then also, if you want to just get into like economics, like velocity of money changes hands more in the middle class and in the lower class because they spend it more on necessities. That allows money to be taxed more. This also creates more revenue. So funneling more money to the rich and out of the hands of the poor or the middle class also decreases revenue in the long run.
And I think I'm a modern monetary theory guy. I highly encourage everybody to read The Deficit Myth by Stephanie Kelton. There's some other good MMT economists that I could recommend as well. But the long and short of it is this: the debt itself is largely meaningless. The government is not a household. We actually can't run out of money. The debt is not the thing that we should be worried about. Inflation is the thing we should be worried about. Again, can't recommend it enough. The debt is a cudgel. It's meaningless. Love to introduce that concept to everybody I get a chance to. But for now, let us move on to our Indiana stories this week and the headlines in a little segment I like to call Around the Corn. So, Mike Braun released a 3,800-page report citing 350 DEI initiatives identified across the Indiana government that they will be cutting. Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson visited Indianapolis on Thursday and said the state of our democracy is what keeps her up at night. Here's one I mentioned briefly before we went on. Todd Rokita, Indiana's Attorney General, accuses Monroe County Sheriff Ruben Marte of violating an ICE hold and releasing a sex offender. The Indiana GOP gets a new director, Representative Rob Green, who will be replacing Josh Waddle, who is joining the Braun administration. And finally, Republic Airways executive Brian Bedford, and this is an Indianapolis-based airline. Bedford was confirmed as the new head of the Federal Aviation Administration. So, I'm going to do a little reverse order here, snake draft. And since Chris got the last story in our national section, I'm going to give him the first story here in our Indiana section. And you wanted to talk about Indiana's approach to education funding. Chris, what you got?
Well, so for one of my projects for school this year, I actually, did a reimagining Indiana's education approach to education funding. I talked to Jennifer McCormick, former superintendent in charge of public instruction as a Republican in Indiana, and the Democratic gubernatorial nominee last cycle. I believe I'm a product of public education. I loved my public education, and school choice, that's great. Like, I think people should be able to go to schools like wherever they want to, but at the same time, I don't think the government should have to pay for those people to go to those schools. If we're talking about outsourcing and funding charter schools and things like that just because they're better than our public schools, no, why can't we make our public schools better? And in a state like Indiana, you have funding going towards charter schools, private schools, virtual schools now, and home schools, plus public schools. So you're taking the Indiana education funding, the taxpayer dollars for education funding, and you're splitting it up between 5 different branches and groups. And what's going to happen is public education is just going to get worse. And I agree with Blythe. I think that education is a human right, is a fundamental human right. And I think that to create our next generation of leaders in this country, we need to be able to have good public education, no matter where you are. And Indiana has a blanket, per pupil spending, and of different, states have different funding formulas and spending models, and it's different based on the states. But with just blanket per pupil spending, it's extremely harmful to low-income districts, because low-income districts can't pass ballot referenda that raise taxes to fund initiatives in public schools. So you're in the suburbs in Indiana, right? And in a, high wealth area with, a lot more success on ballot referenda to be able to fund STEM initiatives, different things in schools like that. And then you go 2 miles, outside of it into more of an urban area, more of a low income area where they can't afford to raise the taxes there. And as a result, those ballot referenda don't get passed. So they don't get the things like the STEM initiatives, and the difference in the quality of education just a couple miles away from each other is staggering within the same state. So, my proposal was have a weighted student funding formula. Is, we have the flat rate of it's, 8,700, something like that, for per pupil spending. But at the same time, you add weights to different groups. So for low income Americans, you add, a 30% weight. For students with disabilities, you add like a 25% weight. ENL learners, you add a 20% weight. Homeless foster students, you add another 20% weight. And that provides the funding that these people in low ballot referenda success, areas like wouldn't get, but now they will get because the government and the state is actually bringing in and giving them that money. And there's a lot of different ways to do it. You know, when I calculated, it was probably about $3 billion extra when like based on what Indiana currently funds. And I went through every single school choice initiative, the vouchers, the tax breaks for donating to, you know, charter schools and private schools and things like that. And I found about $1.1 billion that we could have cut just from school choice and instead of funding 5 different types of schools, we're funding our public schools. We're making our public education better. We're building that next generation of leaders. We're making people self-sufficient. And one of my biggest things too within education funding and just education in general is that there needs to be mandatory civics and financial literacy in public schools everywhere. Because if we want to give kids the tools to be able to be successful with different backgrounds, with different starting points, with different home lives, we want them to come to school and everybody's on the same playing field. Everybody's being taught the same things. It's not, you know, my dad works in investment banking, so like I know how to play the stock market now. No, why don't you have a financial literacy class in high school that you're teaching kids how to be able to play the stock market, how to be able to invest, how to be able to properly manage your money? Because at the end of the day, that's going to stick with them to be able to be self-sufficient, successful adults in whatever they decide to do in their life. I think education is paramount in this country to being able to solve the issues of tomorrow, you know, the issues that we're facing in the next couple decades, years, everything. And with massive cuts to public education and, you know, saying, you know, vouchers so like kids can go, but like still like they still have to pay for transportation to those schools because the schools aren't paying for the busing, right? So there's so many other facets to it rather than saying, okay, let's fund our public education systems. Let's make them so good that people can still elect to go to a charter school or private school, but let's make them so good that they don't have to make that decision. Let's make them so good that they can come in and say, I'm in a great school right now, no matter where I am, if it's an urban area, low income area, suburban area, and this school is setting me up for success. And that's why I think education needs to be funded, but you also have to see education as an investment, rather than an expense. This is something Jennifer McCormick really emphasized to me when I spoke to her. And education, and the problem with education is that you're not going to see immediate results, and you're not going to see in 1 year, you know, literacy rates go through the roof and test scores become amazing, because you have to look at it as an investment. If you stick with the same policy, it's going to take maybe a decade to be able to actually see results of what we're doing. So you have to look at it as an investment rather than the expense, because that investment is investing in the future leaders of our states, of our country. So look at it as the investment. We don't talk about education as an expense anymore from the government.
Chris, I love it, and I'm going to share your proposal in the show notes, so everybody look for that once we've got this thing up afterwards at projectnextindiana.com or also on whosleft.us. The thing that worries me, again, with great proposal, is, well, now the Trump administration is withholding like $100 million plus from Indiana schools, so we can't even begin to rethink the way we fund our schools when we're defunded even more than we were, right? I mean, am I seeing this wrong?
No,
Brandon, I feel like we haven't heard from you in a minute.
Yeah, no, I would just say with education, for me, it's really simple. I work in a public school, actually, but it's really simple, right? Socioeconomic status is the biggest determining factor, right? And I think why it gets tricky is a lot of people don't understand what really leads to academic success. Even if they get that it's socioeconomic status, they don't get why. And it's really attention or time, right? In the classroom, it's more resources for the school to have teachers or educators available to spend attention on that particular student. Each student can get treated as an individual rather than being taught as a classroom where you're going to work at different speeds. It never really works for everyone when you have to do that. And then at home, if your parents parents, if they're not both working and you're, at childcare, if you're older, home alone, if you have parents who are able to be there and help you, or a tutor or someone who can help you learn the things, that's really what's going to get you to that next step, is like meeting the kid where they're at, and then giving them what they need. And that takes resources both at home and at the school. And that's why socioeconomic status, funding our schools is the biggest thing. And I will say, though, I've never heard a Republican say so many things about education that I agree with. So props to you, Chris.
I had to wipe the blue off the screen there to see anyone else.
That's probably the things that I agree with the Democrats most on, is education funding.
And Blythe, do you have any comment? I think the most important thing we can do with our schools is to decouple school funding from property taxes, because that will always just perpetuate existing inequalities.
Yeah, we generally have a low quality of life here in Indiana, and a lot of it's just the same old nonsense that have been happening for decades. And Braun is part of the problem. He's wealthy. He's not paying the same percentage of taxes. He's not paying his fair share. So, you keep schools underfunded. You keep healthcare underfunded. You keep people from wanting to take Braun's job or Rob Green's job or anyone else's job who's sitting pretty with all of these benefits. So, I couldn't agree. I very much agree with Chris. I don't have much to add to that other than how are you really a Republican? Education is so important.
Why don't ruin this kumbaya moment we're having here.
Education shouldn't be a political issue.
It shouldn't, but neither should. I'm inviting you to reconsider that then on healthcare should not be political. We can disagree on what we do with our bodies, but even like what we're doing with our immigrants, it's not just like when people come here, they're not just like sneaking in and like hiding out. Like they're not doing what people are being told to be afraid of doing. And they are benefiting our economy. It's going to start affecting our food now with what we're doing. So I think both parties need to reevaluate and redefine what human rights and their party values are, and actually do that right thing, right? Which most of that, I would assume you would agree with the Democratic Party values, which isn't always implemented, are very much in the lines of Jesus's teachings. Like, just let people eat, let them live, let them learn, let them be cared for. But
from the Republican perspective, I also want to, and this goes with education too, is that, and this is the reason that I'm such a proponent for public education and funding it, is that I want to help people be able to help themselves. And by providing them the blueprint from the base level, from your education, to be able to help themselves, to be able to get them integrate into society and be able to be successful in their own right, that is where it starts in our education system. So if we are not giving these kids the tools to be successful and to be successful capitalists, because I know I'm a capitalist, I know Scott
conscious capitalism needs to be what we're focused on.
But that's my whole thing, is that this is where it all starts. This is the level playing field. This is the ground floor. So we want to be able to empower our next generation, and by just cutting things and doing things based on just property taxes, and for higher income areas having better schools, things like that. No, is that I'm big proponent for merit-based systems and everything like that. We're going to have the same funding. We're going to have the same level playing field, and then see who rises up as a result of that, and give people the power and empower them to be able to fight for themselves.
But also what goes into that, education isn't just this place you go to school. It's like a spoke to a wheel. You're not going to learn if you don't have food in your belly. You're not going to learn well if you don't have a place to sleep at night and a shower. You're not going to learn well if your home life is in distress, or if you don't have access to the medicine you need. So education isn't just going to school and learning and having that funds from our tax dollars. There's a lot more that goes into what good education means. And it's a lot of different things. So that is where the paradigm shift needs to happen with education. We're not just learning from our teachers. We're learning from having conversations like this, Chris, where we can say, yes, you deserve education and so do I. But how we get to that education means we also have to take care of people's health. We have to take care of people's homes. We have to make sure that they are able to move out of these floodplains in Texas. We have to make sure that they can be in as stable an environment as possible and not see people as leeches for needing a little bit of extra support in some parts of their lives. And Chris, I used to agree with you. I was a Republican through and through. I literally cried tears of anger when Obama was elected. Like it was a visceral anger, but I was taught that. So, and that education goes into that too, where you have the civics and things like that. So we can't look at education as just, here is this book, you learn.
No, and I agree with that. And I think from my own experience, so I was in the dual language program from kindergarten through 5th grade, so Spanish and English. And I was one of I was one of 2 white boys in my class, one of 6 white kids in my entire class, and all predominantly Hispanic, low-income kids in our class. But like the greatest thing about education for me was, I would go home. I would go home to my, my family of 4 with my dog and, sit on the couch and watch TV and go to lacrosse practice and things like that. And a lot of other kids would go home. They'd have to care for their siblings, their younger siblings, even as a 4th grader, because their parents were working multiple jobs, everything like that. But then we would come to school and we were all on the same playing field, and it was, we would talk about our home lives. But like, that's why I love the kindergarten approach, because when you're in kindergarten, it's just like, oh, like, tell me about your life. Tell me about where you come from. Like when I was in 4th grade, one of the kids in my class was telling me a story about how he crossed the border and had to hide in a dumpster from to be able to hide from police officers and things like that. And hearing that in 4th grade, I wasn't politically involved at that point, obviously, but just hearing that, it just completely humanizes issues like that and just makes you think from your perspective. And while I do have conservative viewpoints on immigration reform and on closing the border and things like that, just hearing those stories from a young age makes you develop your worldview, your values, and understand the fact that, okay, we have very separate lives. When I go home, my life looks very different. When you go home, your life looks very different, but our lives are the same in this class. And we can talk about our lives in a open and free manner, but we're learning the same things. We're being pushed the same way. And that is just one of the amazing benefits I got from being in such a diverse school district, in such a diverse class. And one of the reasons that I think, education is paramount to everything.
Yeah, I'd love to keep going on this all day. Incredibly deep topic, but I do need to move on. Brandon, we're going to touch on something that Blythe sort of mentioned in passing. Democrats don't always live up to their values, and the Indianapolis Democrats are a perfect example of this. They continue to show their ass. What's going on there?
Yeah, and admittedly, might not be the most well-read on this, so if one of y'all can alley-oop me after. But, we've had Democrats who are leaving the caucus stating reasons of lack of accountability. We have motions to remove Congress members. We have those accused of sexual assault. I just think when things like this happen, it's important to remember that values should trump party. And just because someone successfully runs in your party and has the letter you like by their name doesn't mean you should support them when they do things that are against your values.
Could not agree more. Yeah. So, we talked about this a couple weeks ago. The most recent counselor to call for Hogsett's resignation is Krista Carlino. She also called for the resignation, or at least to step down from leadership of Council President Vop Osili and Vice President Allie Brown. There was a contentious caucus meeting after she had done this in a public setting without maybe talking to them first, but that she was going to call for their stepping down. It's been contentious within the whole caucus. This week, she stepped down as a member of the caucus, she is still a member of the council. At the meeting before the full council this week, Jesse Brown, friend of the show, been here many times, also he introduced a formal motion calling for the whole council to vote on calling for Asalee and Allie Brown to step down. A lot of this goes to perceived interference by Asalee and Brown in the sexual harassment investigation into Hogsett's office. Before this past Monday's city council, members of the council had debated whether they should pay their remaining $300,000 legal bill from the firm Fisher Phillips, who conducted this report. Well, Fisher Phillips still hasn't turned over their complete findings. They presented their report, but everything that went into report is still outstanding. They omitted some creepy behavior by Hogsett himself. And then, continuing the creepy guy theme, we also found out this week that Keith Graves, one of the city councilors, was accused of sexual assault by a woman he was in a relationship a couple years ago, 30 years his junior. Turns out there was also a order of protection filed against Graves last year in 2024 by a different woman. He is stepping down as chair of the education committee in light of those allegations. Blythe, you're really close to Indy. You know, you're a county away. You see all this. You're trying to run for state office next year. You know, does seeing the Democratic leadership in the biggest city in the state showing their ass all week, all month, you know, going back a year, does that affect you? Does that affect the branding that you're trying to do?
I think it does. And I get a lot of heat from other Democrats when I speak up about Democrats. So if you're one of those people who don't like that, I hear you and I understand.
The same way with Republicans.
But I also think we need accountability. You know, I don't think we necessarily need to be doing the shame game, which Hoosier hospitality includes a lot of shame and passive aggressiveness. It's humans are going human. We are going, it is, we're going to screw up. But I also don't think that our tax dollars need to be paying for any politician to get out of political trouble, whether it be a Democrat or Republican, because we're doing the same thing with Todd Rokita, constantly spending more than his value to our state to keep him licensed. And while I would love to be like, oh, can we just focus on the issues? We can't focus on the issues when people are being sexually abused or harmed. And they all need to be held accountable. And it, from what it sounds like, and I am not in deep in this, I know, trying to stay focused on any news that's happening, because every second is like its own year worth of news, is really hard. And sometimes I do just have to step away from it. And I've kind of done that with this. But that's not to say that I don't think the investigation is ethical. I think that law firm is leaving things out intentionally because obviously there's money involved. And I think that's inappropriate. And we're seeing that happen, of course, now on the state level, and we're seeing it happen with SCOTUS. Our attorneys aren't even abiding by their oaths. Like, who are we to look up to here in this time of turmoil when our elected and appointed officials can't honor their own oaths and have some gumption? Hey, I screwed up. I should not have done this. Let's figure out a way for me to finish my term, but also to prevent this from happening in the future. Hold me accountable. Does that mean I resign? Maybe.
Yeah, and boy, Brandon, I can't encourage you, and I know you cover a lot of national stories on your channel. Start digging into some of this stuff right down the road, man. There is a veritable treasure trove of content there for you, man. They just walk into a rake every day, dude.
Yeah, it seems the more I learn about Indiana Democrats, the less I like them. There's the
yeah, yes.
Can we talk about the
nonsense.
establishment of that and not like I'm a Democrat because of the party values, not because I am an establishment lover.
Yeah, no, to be clear, there's plenty that are good. You seem fine. I mean, this is the first time I've ever talked to you, but you seem perfectly nice. Jesse Brown, amazing dude. But then there's some where it's like, oh, who elected you? How did you get elected?
It's a machine, you know. You got to know the right people. You got to glad hand the right folks, and you know, if you grease the right palms, you're all set. So staying in Indiana here, moving about 30 miles south, Blythe, you wanted to talk about Camp Atterbury, maybe concentration camp Atterbury, if they have their way. Where'd it go? There it is. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not liking the rumors I'm hearing. I did ask my state senator, and I know that's a federal thing, if he knew anything about it. He played dumb. I know Braun really loves Trump, and he's really following the playbook. And as soon as like we're in military is doing advanced training and ROTC stuff at Atterbury right now, so there is a lot of movement coming and going, and people are speculating that they're bringing in generators, they're doing this. So I don't know what it's really for, but I'll be really ticked off if that's in our backyard.
Yeah. So I guess it's been used for, you know, different things besides just being a, you know, training station. In 2021, after a bunch of Afghan refugees were evacuated after the Taliban took the country back over, a bunch were temporarily housed here at Atterbury. Now, it wouldn't be the first site like this. I guess Fort Bliss in Texas was identified as a potential deportation hub, with plans to hold thousands of detainees in massive tents, just like in Florida. Is concentration camp an appropriate term for what they're describing here?
I think it is, and it's not to, and I'm not trying to diminish anyone who was literally in a Holocaust concentration camp, but I think using that word as something that is that term is something that's universal enough that people understand the weight of what is happening. We are literally taking brown people, a lot who are U.S. citizens, and concentrating them into these very terrible conditions. Some of whom aren't making it out alive, some of who we don't even know where they actually are. Are they even in the United States anymore? Are they in Africa? Are they in El Salvador? It's really bad. And this is rhyming way too well with what happened in 1930s Germany. So I think we do need to call it that, if for nothing else than to anger people enough to start talking about what is happening here. This is really, really bad. This is so bad. So bad.
I think, you know, a lot of people hear concentration camp and their mind goes right to like death camp. It goes to Auschwitz. There were a lot of steps starting with concentration camps. You know, the Nazis took power in 1933. They didn't start the quote unquote final solution until I want to say 41. So what started as concentration camps for political enemies and undesirables or whatever turned into death camps over a series of years, over a series of decisions. So I think it's important to use these terms so they don't become that. I mean, we don't want to have these things at all, but we especially don't want them to get worse.
We don't want them to get worse, and we're funding this, and it's atrocious. Let's pretend everyone who's been rounded up is actually a violent criminal. That doesn't mean we give them food with maggots in them. That doesn't mean we put them in a tent in a floodplain in the Everglades where there are literally deadly animals and bugs. Like, I've been in the military. I ran the risk of being a prisoner of war, and I would hope that I wouldn't have been treated that way. Now, would I have expected to be treated that way? No, I don't think I would have been treated well. But I just, These are humans. These are children. These are pregnant women. These are people who have been feeding us our entire lives because they pick our food, they harvest our food, they put our food on the shelves, they transport our food. And I think we're missing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, did I hear a?
I just said, yeah, I
Maybe.
was just going to say quickly. I mean, I just think even if you want to take the most pragmatic, devoid of empathy route, we did this before to Japanese Americans on the same grounds using the Alien Enemies Act, the exact same law that Trump is appealing to do it now. And we had to pay reparations for that. We paid like 1.5 million or millions of dollars, some amount. So even like in the most lack of empathy, conservative, not wanting to pay because of taxes way, we've done this before and we came to the conclusion it was wrong and we had to pay for it. So why do it again?
Yeah, I agree.
Just to go off that point too, I also think like it's not, when you look at the broader issue too, I don't think that it's being 100% handled the right way, but it's not just Republicans who have done this. Obama was the first one to build the cages for illegal immigrants at the border. So so obviously we have no plausible solution right now. There is not something that one side is offering that's better than the other because they're both doing the same thing. And that's the problem when you have such a massive influx of illegal immigrants in your country, is that you want to follow the law, you want to enforce the law and make sure those laws are on the books. But then how do you deal with all of these people now? How do you ensure that they have due process? Where do you put them when we have still massive incarceration rates around the world and our prisons are overflowing? What do you do with these people? And how do you ensure that they're vetted before just releasing them and let them walk free in the United States? Most likely not going to show up for a court date.
Throwing past presidents under the bus. We're not we are in a right now situation, and we have one of the highest rates of incarceration in the world. We incarcerate people for the dumbest things because prisons have been privatized and they are now a moneymaker. There are a lot of systemic, toxic capitalist problems with this, and talking about something that happened in 2008 is not relevant right now.
What I'm just saying is that
I get what you're saying. I know what you're saying.
Yes.
But right now, the Republican talk point, well, Biden did this, well, Clinton did that. I don't care what they did.
That's the easiest thing.
They were wrong too, and we can say that.
Yes. You asked what should we do? I personally think that for anyone who comes forward to be vetted and does not have a violent criminal history, we should offer amnesty, whether that's a pathway to residency or citizenship. That makes the most sense. It keeps them in our tax base. It allows them to work jobs. It aids us. And mass deportation costs hundreds of billions of dollars and pulls out of our tax base. Even undocumented immigrants pay like $100 billion a year in taxes. That would only go up if we allowed them a pathway to legally work and things like that.
I agree with that. We need
and many of them were on a pathway, and that pathway is ridiculous and
exactly. It takes too long. You have to spend thousands of dollars on it, and it needs to be streamlined. I completely agree with that.
And other countries have gotten this stuff down. They've gotten the universal healthcare and education and the immigration thing down. Like, I don't know why we think we have to always do something different here. We flush toilets just like they do in Europe. Can't we do the same with our other systems? Like, for real.
Actually, the toilets in Europe
flush the other direction in Australia.
In America.
Well, they do. Australians are a little wonky, but
yeah, exactly. I was abroad in Barcelona. Their toilets are a little bit different.
The last thing I wanted to talk about here in Indiana today, and this is sad. Indiana public broadcasting stations will be eliminating their entire statewide team of reporters and editors at the end of the year after the General Assembly defunded the organization. This is a nonprofit consortium of 17 public radio and TV stations across the state. This is the group headed by Brandon J. Smith that hosts the Indiana Week in Review on WFYI out of Indianapolis. This is really the only source of statewide reporting that goes out to all corners of the state. Local news in Indianapolis, local news in South Bend, Fort Wayne, Evansville, take your pick, do not do a great job covering state government at all. There's a syndicated weekly show, I think the CBS and Fox affiliates out of Indianapolis work on that together. It's a half hour. It's very surface level, both sides stuff. Losing Week in Review is going to be detrimental to the whole state. And when they go off, I kind of think that leaves us here at Who's Left this week as the most thorough state level coverage in the state. And again, I'm proud to be doing that, but man, I went way over my head, dude.
Well, no one should have that pressure. And you mentioned Rob Green being appointed as leader of the Republican Party. He's my House representative, and that actually really ticks me off because he voted for all of this. They all need to go. All of the Republicans need to be voted out. And I'm not saying that all the Democrats are great, but we need to get progressive people who give a damn about public services, to include our public broadcasting, to be voted in. This is stupid. It's dumb.
You know the thing that gets me, and Chris, I want to ask you about this because one of the local radio personalities in Indianapolis, Rob Kendall on WIBC, he's a big libertarian guy, and like he didn't get the outcry over this happening. Well, he's like, oh, look, man, no one's shedding a tear when us in the commercial radio industry and the commercial news and talk business get fired. What's the difference? Sell ads, go do another thing. I think like he doesn't see the difference between a public service and a commercial product.
I agree with that aspect, but I also think that public service broadcasting, it shouldn't be especially partisan or political, and that's why it should be a public service, because it should be offered for everybody. So like a place like NPR, which gets millions and millions of dollars of federal funding, which has increasingly gone to the left and is not just by nonpartisan anymore. I don't why and is a private entity and can, and has ads and does all those things, then why do we need to continue to fund them? But things like Sesame Street, like I think that it's a great thing for our kids. Like, why should we be taking that away? And so I think, when it becomes political, when it becomes partisan, is that when that should be privatized. But when it's just for public service and public information, and any public information could be politicized, I think that it should be. But I'm more to the standpoint of most of these places could benefit on their own, being private organizations without the government funding.
Yeah,
I completely disagree with that.
NPR is not in any way like a leftist organization.
But it's increasingly gone to the left without a
no,
doubt.
because
I think they've stayed where they are.
Opinions are left, and they report on the right things.
It's just the meme that facts have a liberal bias, right?
Well, of course, that's the problem. It's being fact check, and I would argue that PBS, WFYI, and NPR, that is public education at our fingertips that just got stripped.
It is also important to kind of like, and if you think that mixing companies who do private services to also do a public service can be problematic, sure, right? But like NPR, what they're publicly funded to do isn't like they're reporting, like they have like public services like with the radio, and then their private services with like their website and the reporting and things like that. So
Chris, do you listen to NPR?
Yes, I do. I don't listen to it anymore.
Their politics, their weekly, they're like really short daily NPR thing. I actually had to stop listening to it for a little while because they were reporting so many things on that were like too kind to Trump, in my opinion. I was like, no, he is a nutbag. Like during the election, it was insane how much airtime Trump got, and I was just like, I can't do this right now. So they are actually very.
I mean, if you wanted to, I mean. That's still the amount of airtime Trump got. Like, do you mean like them promoting him, or just the fact
being because they were not biased left, because they were being nonpartisan about it, was actually pissing me off. That's
They-
what I'm
they
saying. Like,
really are
they do
gonna
a
really
very
swipe
good
down
job
Tucker.
of reporting the facts, and the facts are not going to be in the Republicans' favor. I'm sorry, they just aren't.
That's not true either, because
Yeah, it is.
Not on a lot of
everything
things
that
that
Democrats
Trump
are trying
does.
to
I
propose
mean-
sounds all well and great, but when you're actually trying to employ it and do that, they don't work, and it doesn't.
They do work. They
But
do
it-
work.
no, it
They do
doesn't.
work. We're
No, it
seeing it
doesn't.
happen in
Not
every
always, not always,
developed
especially
country.
with the way that they want to do it.
No.
Oh, listen, I love this vigorous back and forth. So here, this one will set off some fireworks. Let's open a can of worms here.
Oh, let's do it.
And our one big thing for this week, we are going to talk about the U.S.-Israel relationship and all of the things that are downstream from it, like anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and all that stuff. Big can of worms. Who wants the first night crawler, I guess?
I will. I'll go. And I know I am saying this from a privileged middle-class white woman in America. I am not Jewish. What is happening in Israel did not start on October 7th. This has been going on for so much longer than most of us have been alive.
It's been going on since the Ottoman Empire.
Yes, yes, it has. And it is so entwined in their DNA and their reality. It's so bad what's happening to Palestine. It is so, so bad.
But
I do not like Benjamin Netanyahu. I think he is a war criminal. And
he's just a criminal.
He is a criminal. Yeah. He is a criminal. He is absolutely a criminal. And the United States is absolutely guilty of supporting him on both sides of the aisle. And I think it's atrocious. We need to end that relationship. We need to end funding Israel and supporting their universal health care and their universal education and their rights to abortion, and pay attention to what is actually happening here. We are not America first by supporting Israel.
I completely disagree with that, because if you want to, Israel is the only westernized pro-democracy country in that region.
That country is not a democracy.
It is not.
If you exist under apartheid conditions, that is in no way a democracy.
Within the country itself, religious toleration, people, Muslims, Jews, Christians can live in harmony together. You can be gay there. Women have rights there. Okay.
Can you be Palestinian and alive?
What'd you say?
Can you be a Palestinian who's alive or not living under apartheid there? Like the things you're saying,
you can be a Palestinian in Israel. 100%.
Oh my God!
Yes, you can. You can, but like
there are
Hamas supporting pro-Palestinian, probably not. But
I'm asking if you could be a Palestinian in Gaza, which is under Israeli occupation. If Palestinians can exist in Gaza, you're naming a bunch of rights that don't exist for Palestinians. Is the point?
Exactly, and that's because
they're being occupied by Israel, and it constitutes.
No, it's not because of Israel. It's because Palestine itself, Hamas-controlled Palestine, is a radical Islamic the radical Islamic terrorist group. They suppress their own people. They throw gay people off of roofs.
Does that make genocide okay?
Put their arm. No, yeah, but you know what? Hamas deliberately oppresses their own people, so they
Hamas came out of being backed into a corner by Israel.
Okay, but let's go back to what happened on October 7th. Israel didn't invade Palestine.
Israel ignored intelligence about what Hamas was doing.
Palestinians on the Sukkot, one of the most holy days in all of Israeli history, which honors the 40 years the Israelites wandered the desert after the Exodus from Egypt. Hamas came in, kidnapped people at a pro-peace concert festival, kidnapped people, raped, murdered women, children, and there are still 50 hostages still in Gaza
but you realize, you realize Israel has killed 20 times that. Oh, wait, 20 times that is just the amount of children they've killed. They've killed 50 times that since October the 7th.
Okay, well, you want to talk about Hamas using their own people as human shields, burying weapons and arms centers under hospitals, under schools. They deliberately oppress their own people so they cannot rise up against them. All right, so
I thought like Mossad was this like badass spy agency. Shouldn't they be able to get the like, you know, several thousand people who are actually active Hamas members without carpet bombing the entire Gaza Strip? I mean, I've seen estimates as high as 400,000 dead there.
And when they need to when they're sending in missiles to Israel, and Israel needs to protect itself because it is surrounded by countries that hate it. You know, Iran is the number one state sponsor of terrorism and funds Hezbollah and Hamas. What does Iran say?
I don't know. I think Israel might be taking that title. I don't know if Iran still has that title anymore with what Israel's doing to Lebanon, Iran, Gaza.
Okay, all right, but you want to talk about what the Islamic countries are doing right now? Why don't we talk about the 600,000 civilians that were massacred in Syria, or the millions displaced Africans?
Can we get back to Palestine and Israel instead of going off on the Republican?
I think all of that is terrible. I don't think any of that absolves Israel what they're doing. Do you think that Israel is occupying Gaza? Do you agree with the ICJ? Because the International Court of Justice has ruled in on this. I'm just curious if you accept that ruling that they are occupying Gaza and that it constitutes apartheid. Do you accept those things? Or do you deny them?
The problem with Israel is not. I don't believe that Israel is officially occupying Gaza. They are.
So on what grounds
Israel is the one who facilitates aid. The Palestinian Humanitarian Aid Foundation is the one that brings that in there.
On what grounds do you disagree with the ICJ on? I'm just curious.
I couldn't tell you about what the ICJ report is. I don't have that in front of me, so I couldn't. I'm not going to talk.
So you just disagree on vibes?
No, but I'm not. I don't know exactly what you're referencing from the ICJ. So if I saw it, I read it, then I would do that. But I also believe that the Gaza Strip in general is. How do I put this? Israel, yes, has occupation, I'd say, within the Gaza Strip, but it's also to maintain the border between Israel and Palestine to ensure that, and they're still ensuring that people are getting aid, people are doing things, but Hamas is the one who's taking the aid from them. Hamas is once again deliberately oppressing their own people.
So then you also disagree with Oxfam, right? Because Oxfam, which is like a credible institution, has done this in conflicts all around the world. In Sudan, they've done it in Russia, Ukraine, and they found that throughout this conflict, half of the amount of trucks that were needed to supply the needed amount of aid for those in Palestine, only half were getting through the border. So that's before any Hamas can come into play. Israel was only letting half of the amount of trucks needed through, to the point that at the worst point of this conflict, Palestinians were living on less calories a day than is in a single can of beans.
Okay, but with the half of the trucks that did go through, that aid didn't get to the actual Palestinian people.
A lot of that is because of the Israelis. There is famine. They are harming people, Chris. They are harming an entire
but I'm not going to deny. But once
people.
Again, we have to go back to the initial fact.
We're not going back to the Ottoman Empire. We're going to deal with right now what happened on October 7th. Not great, but Hamas was created because these people have been backed into corners. If you are mistreated like that, you're eventually going to rise up and fight for yourself.
Hamas keeps them in a corner. The people want to rise up, but they deliberately oppress any dissent. They murder dissenters in Palestine.
Okay.
People who dissent.
I think we all agree Hamas friggin' sucks, right? Okay.
Yes.
Great. Now, that said, the Israeli government of Benjamin Netanyahu is incredibly far right, and they do not want peace. The little plucky victim of Israel from the 40s through the 60s does not exist anymore. They've taken a hard right turn since Likud became a thing in the 1970s. I kind of don't want anybody to say a damn thing about Israel and whether they are a democracy or a good guy unless they know who Meir Kahan is. And this was a far-right extremist, and the people who are in Netanyahu's government are descendants of Kahan. They are Kahanists. in 1995 when we had the Oslo Agreement. I'm old enough to remember I was in high school and I saw Rabin and Arafat shaking hands on the White House lawn. You know who stopped the Oslo Agreement from being implemented? It was the Israeli far right. It was not the Palestinians. And the people like Itamar Ben-Gvir, like Bezalel Smotrich, who are major parts of the Israeli government now, to this day, they are far-right Jewish supremacist extremists. They do not want peace. They believe in something called Greater Israel. They want to take over the entire occupied territories, as well as parts of Jordan and Iraq and Syria.
But that's not what Israel's trying to do right now. Once again, Israel did not invade Palestine. It did not invade Gaza.
They've occupied it since 1967.
And I'll agree with you on that point. But it is also for the safety and security, because if Palestine started to occupy it, yes, once again,
You're
Hamas
doing apartheid for their safety.
No, I'm not. I'm not agreeing with that aspect either. But once again, it's not just okay. We're going to give it to you, and then we're going to try to make sure that everybody's okay and happy. But because once again, you can't trust Hamas-run Palestine.
So I think
they never actually tried to implement a peace agreement to even let it fail.
Because both sides, it's both sides that
agree, but also we're talking about genocide at this point, and I think it's a simple moral principle that genocide is wrong. I don't think it matters.
Yeah, but you also have to.
I don't think it matters if someone fired.
The situation of why it's happening right now. Okay,
there is no. It doesn't matter.
And say, okay, we're going to let you come in and bomb us, and kill our people.
Genocide is wrong if somebody fired a rocket at you, or if you're doing it because you don't like their skin color. It's still genocide. It's still wrong. We still probably shouldn't be backing it, enabling it, funding it. I do agree that there is a place for U.S. funding in Israel, I will say, because I do think the Iron Dome is important. I think that in terms of like geopolitics, I do think that they play an important role as an ally. But I think that as an ally, we're beholden to the Genocide Convention to hold them to the Genocide Convention.
But what's the solution? Okay, because everybody says, and I would be all for a ceasefire, which it looks like we are getting to that point. President Trump, yes. And with the hopeful release of the hostages, but this wouldn't be going on still if Hamas didn't have 50 Israeli hostages still in Gaza right now.
How many hostages does Israel have?
Thousands and thousands of Palestinian prisoners
held without charge.
They are using as slaves.
I think
they didn't go in. They didn't go in and invade a pro-peace concert in Palestine.
Chris, you are wrong.
People.
This goes well beyond October 7th.
I just want to say that, like that, the idea that this happened because of October the 7th would portray the idea that on October the 6th it was like rainbows and sunshine in Gaza, which isn't true.
It's not.
But like you asked, what we should do. I think that we should tell Israel that we're going to follow our own laws and that we don't send aid to countries committing war crimes, and that if they continue, we'll follow the Genocide Convention, and that all signatories to the convention will act to stop a country in which is committing genocide. I think it's simple. And if we laid those two things out in front of Israel, like, hey, you have 60 days, you have 30 days, walk this back. I think that's the right answer.
Of course, that sounds like the amazing solution. No genocide, ceasefire, everybody has peace. But that's not where we're at. That's not the plausible solution right now.
Not when Trump is in charge. No, it's not.
No, but it's not when Hamas still has Israeli hostages. That is not the solution right now.
That is not what started this.
I don't think you need 2,000-ton bombs to save hostages. I think that's how you kill hostages and a lot of other innocent people.
But it's also how you cripple Hamas.
Then they've crippled it, right? Why are they still doing it?
The country it's already been
like Iran, who continue to fund
like
Hamas.
For instance, the ICC came out with a bunch of arrest warrants for Netanyahu and for a bunch of
the
Hamas.
ICC always does that. It's all
and
bullshit.
For a bunch
it's not bullshit.
The ICC
they did it specifically for a bunch of Hamas leaders who they said were like the ones leading the way in what Hamas did. Every single person on Hamas's side on that arrest warrant has been killed.
Good.
The U.S. and Israel are out of line with international consensus.
Yes.
And that's the facts. The U.S. has always protected Israel from any punishments handed down by international institutions by swinging our big American dick around and using our veto power.
Yeah, it's the most vulnerable country in the region, and that's
I
why
agree with you. I agree with you, and
But
that
that doesn't
justify
mean
them
we should
doing
be
genocide.
allowing genocide. And AIPAC is absolutely part of this nonsense.
Okay, let's go there. Let's talk about the American stuff downstream from this. AIPAC is a very powerful lobbying organization. This is basically the right flank of the Israeli lobby, because there are liberal pro-peace Jewish organizations that also lobby in Washington, but AIPAC has a ton of money from the Adelson family, as along with many other prominent fundraisers, and they have an inordinate amount of sway in U.S. politics. They punch way above their weight, and the entire Republican Party is on board, and an uncomfortable amount of Democrats are also on the AIPAC payroll.
So I think, honestly, AIPAC is a big part of it. I think it's a conjunct of a few things. I think money, AIPAC is a big part. I think religion is actually a bigger part. I think those who aren't influenced by money or swayed by religious dogma, there's a lot of evangelicals who see Israel as like the holy promised land and all of that. Yeah. And then there's also the third, that Jewish people are a oppressed minority group in America. And I think a lot of people rightfully want to I don't know, like a sense of allyship with them, right? But it can go too far in that you should absolutely protect the rights and the ability to exist for minority groups, but that doesn't enable them to turn around and do atrocious acts, and then you just support them to the end by all means.
Yeah. I think because of AIPAC's funding with both sides of the aisle, it has allowed this to be perpetuated. We haven't gotten results. We haven't ended we haven't gotten a ceasefire. Regardless of who we want to blame for what actions, having that money in our American politics on Democrat and Republican sides has tied our hands. Like I think so much more could have been done historically had they not been ensuring that things are going pretty much how they are.
Well, yeah, I think the most pernicious thing about the Israel lobby in this country is that you are not allowed to criticize the policy of the Israeli government without being called anti-Semitic.
Yes.
They've done a really good job of making these two things the same thing when you're not. When you're talking about Israel, you're talking about the government of Israel. You're not talking about the Jewish people as a whole. And I think it's cynical on the part of the Netanyahu government to have worked to make that so these things are the same, and it is a disservice to actual Holocaust survivors and Jews across the world who have been fighting against this like dual loyalty trope for as long as Israel has been a country.
To go off of that, like I agree with that aspect, and I think, and obviously, and you can look at any nation state, and I don't agree with Netanyahu on everything, nor do I completely support and back him, nor do I support an entire nation or state and what they stand for. There's always going to be able to poke holes in things, but from what I'm seeing, especially from a college campus perspective right now, it's not just anti-Israeli policies, it's blatant anti-Semitism, and it's kids and college students who don't actually know what they're fighting for, what they're protesting about, that continue to perpetuate this extremely violent and harmful rhetoric against Jewish people. I am all for, peaceful protests and being able to make your voice heard, but when you are coining phrases like Intifada revolution and globalize the Intifada, which you put it in context, it goes back to the first and second Intifada, the violent Palestinian uprisings and the suicide bombings within Israel. It creates a toxic and anti-Semitic atmosphere, and Jewish people are afraid right now. I have a lot of Jewish friends on college campuses. I'm at GW right now. One of my friends is at GW. She was fearful. She's Jewish. She was fearful because of the encampment right outside, because of what they were saying, and the blatant anti-Semitic and anti-Jewish remarks that they were saying. They weren't just saying, let's stop, the Israeli policies. No, it's, kill the Zionists and burning the Israeli flag and burning the American flag at the same time. Meanwhile, these people don't know what they're fighting for. You see Queers for Palestine, that's chickens for KFC. They don't understand what they're actually fighting for, because if they went to Palestine right now, they'd be thrown off a building. So
yeah, but they can still see that
they can still support
genocide is wrong.
Exactly, but at the same time, they don't know that you go and ask these people.
They're not saying I want to go there.
Yeah,
they're just saying
like
you should do
some of
that,
these
no matter if they're homophobic
you see some
or
of these
not.
interviews. You ask some of these college students, where would you rather live, Israel or Palestine? And they say, oh, like Palestine, like no, Israel, like. And then they say the worst things about Israel, and then they're like, "Do you know that
okay, hold on. I have to.
Palestine.
This is like, and I'm not meaning you specifically, but this is like a robot's understanding of empathy. Like empathy isn't transactional. Having empathy for a group doesn't only exist because you think that they would also empathize with you. Like Palestinians could shoot me dead the second that they saw me, and I would still think that genocide is wrong, and I would have empathy for what they're going through. Hold on, and I'll be a more pertinent example. If I saw a KKK member being ruthlessly executed, I would feel empathy for them. I would feel bad for them. They would kill me.
I understand that too, but it's not just at the empathy level of like these people are people, and some of it is, but it takes a step further to once again further the Jewish people is probably one of the most oppressed peoples in all of history, and if we do not support them, their right to exist, their right to their homeland, which they were in first, then what are we doing? We're not to support a pro-Westernized country where you can start your own business, you can be gay, you can be a woman and walk outside without the permission of your husband. That's the type of ideology that I think we should be promoting.
Those things are all great, but they shouldn't go genociding an entire people. Like they should take their values and apply them to everybody equally. But I think what we really have here. How do we get
the hostages out? How do we? Because once the ceasefire agreement is when the hostages are back, there can be a ceasefire. So,
I think
what you're talking about is the public understanding of what's happening, and you're right. Jewish people aren't inherently anti-Palestine. So no group of people should be treated that way in any area. And I know you're seeing this on college campuses. It doesn't make it right. That needs better public education.
And that's my point. And it's like
we just defunded that. So,
but that's my point too. Is that these people, you ask them, they're chanting "river from the river to the sea, Gaza must be free." You ask them what river
they should be
and
free,
sea.
Right? But the thing,
but you ask them what river and what sea, and they have no idea what they're talking about.
Okay, well then that is a wholly different problem.
Yeah, exactly, it's the education component problem, and it's that people are going to their own echo chambers. They look for the information that they want to get. And as a result, the polar opposites on each side form, and Jews being one of the most oppressed groups in all of history, never being able to fit into one party or another, because what the Democrats or the Republicans, will go against them, in a heartbeat if it helps.
Well, for that instance, so are Arabs and Muslims, right? They're just especially in America, like Islamophobia.
Yeah, and indigenous people,
right?
Well, no, but Chris does bring up something really important because look, anti-Semitism is a real issue. Mm-hmm. It is dangerous, and it is as old as time. And I think what we have here now is generational trauma. This is hurt people.
Yes. No,
and it is understandable that the descendants of survivors of the Holocaust are skittish. Mm-hmm. It is perfectly reasonable, but being on the receiving end of a genocide doesn't give you a pass to then go do one later. Like being an abuse victim does not excuse abuser behavior down the line. Like Michael Jackson was abused by his father and didn't get to have a normal childhood. that doesn't excuse the alleged things he did as an adult, right? And I think it's a weird metaphor to use for this situation, but in a way, it's kind of the same thing. It's two groups of people who have been hurt generationally and victimized by forces more powerful than themselves, and are just trading it back and forth for generations now.
Yeah.
No, I agree with that sentiment completely, and I think the problem is, like, everybody would like to live in a perfect world, and where there's there's an Israeli state and a Palestine state, and everybody lives in peace, right? And everything's good. And of course, I'm completely against genocide, but so you stop the bombing, you stop, going into Palestine, then what are you doing about the Israelis that are currently being held in Hamas captivity right now? How are we going in to try to help them while being able to cripple Hamas, who still continues to chant death to Israel, death to the hypocrites and infidels? What
if you were an occupied party, wouldn't you? Like, would you not fight back with whatever you had? And again, I'm not excusing what Hamas does, but like, you can understand why an occupied people would resist. The word intifada, sounds scary, but I think it's just scary because it's an Arabic word. It means resistance. They literally use the same word.
It's struggle.
They use the same word in the National Holocaust Museum's Arabic translation of the story of the Warsaw Ghetto.
Also, I think
you also want to put it in context with the actual Intifada revolutions that happened, because yes, Intifada means struggle, resistance. You know what also meant struggle? Mein Kampf. But we're not going to be promoting that right now. So you have to put it in the context of the situations that have occurred and in the context of history. And when you look at the Intifada revolutions and the violent Palestinian uprisings and the suicide bombings within Israel, it's a tie to the global call for the destruction of the
Why
Jewish
did they do
people
that?
of the Jewish
Why
state.
did they do that? They were under occupation.
This was in 2005 was the second Intifada revolution.
The first Intifada was like 1986
Exactly.
or 87.
Okay, hold on, wait, because context is important. The first Intifada happened because an Israeli driver struck 4 Palestinian civilians who were peacefully protesting. The second started after Israel killed hundreds of Palestinian civilians in a matter of weeks. I think context as to why these things start are important. And I do think that plenty of bad things happened in both intifadas. I mean, when you're talking about like guerrilla type warfare or whatever, obviously heinous shit is going to happen. But I mean, comparing the Intifada, which was like protest that Israel turned violent, to Mein Kampf, like language used during the Holocaust and stuff, is pretty insane to me. I also want to say that I think it's important to not define the message of the majority by the minority. I agree that plenty of people are engaging in anti-Semitism. There's plenty of people who are piggybacking off pro-Palestine just to do like anti-Jew rhetoric and stuff like that. I think all of that is harmful and all of it should be called out. But when you're pretending that that is the majority of those who are protesting a genocide, that's where I start to have troubles with it. And I also just think, I don't think people have to be experts to know right and wrong, right? Like to have a moral compass.
But people need context to be able to understand that. And like you bringing it up too, but from my perspective, from like people like you, yes, you have facts on your side and you are arguing from the Palestinian position, and that's perfect. And I completely agree with, I don't agree with everything you're arguing, but I agree with the statements that you're making and saying that they're legit, right? But being a college student and being on college campuses where this is happening and seeing the rhetoric that these people are saying, and then asking these actual people the questions about what's going on, and them having no idea of the context of these situations at all, or what the terms that they're saying or even means, that is the problem. Because the younger generation is the ones that are promoting the violent rhetoric and are promoting anti-Semitism without actually knowing that they're promoting anti-Semitism.
I don't agree. I think that it's like, we're just talking about a protester on a college campus, like for them to expect them to know, like,
what's happened all across the country at these college campuses?
What'd you say?
Have you seen what's happened all across the country at these college campuses?
I don't think it's as extreme as what you're saying, but I do
think
see
overwhelmingly peaceful. Yeah, I've
people
actually
being harmed by our current administration on college campuses.
I've actually interviewed.
That's a different topic, and I'll go.
It isn't. I mean, it's kind of the
no,
same
no,
thing
but
that
I'm
you're
saying
talking
that's
about.
a different topic in terms of funding for yes, but I'll agree with you on the fact of we shouldn't be going after Harvard and places like this for cutting their funding. But I do agree with them needing to condemn anti-Semitism on their college campuses.
Condemning anti-Semitism is very different. I think your experience is not invalid because perception is reality, but I don't think that is actually the reality. Like that is largely happening.
I think it is. I think for tons of people it is. Like, I just want to be clear. I do think tons of college students are probably experiencing anti-Semitism on college campuses. It's probably escalated since October the 7th. What gets me when Trump is like, let's tackle anti-Semitism on college campuses is it's like, well, what about like Islamophobia? What about like anti-Arab hate crimes? Because those have escalated since October the 7th as well. And I think
anti-immigrants.
I mean, exactly, right? There's plenty of groups, but like if we're talking specifically about this conflict, in the same way you could logically say, sure, more anti-Semitism is going to happen. Sure, the same with more Islamophobia. Just like after 9/11, right? We saw ramp ups. After October the 7th, we're seeing ramp ups. So like, why not just say tackle hate crimes, tackle it writ large? Why is it just anti-Semitism we're talking about?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, I think in the end, it all comes down to on all sides. It's religious fundamentalism, and religious fundamentalism, whether it's Jewish, Islamic, or Christian, or any other, is bad. And I think the root of it's so many of the problems of the human condition. So we just got a couple of minutes left, and I thank you guys for this conversation. This has been really fun and engaging, and thanks everybody in the comments. We had a good spicy comments section today. Love to see it, but I did want to give each of you a chance to just kind of say where folks can find you. If you got a website or social media, let us know where we can find you, and then I'll wrap things up. Blythe, why don't you go first?
You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and currently, for now at least, TikTok, friends of Blythe Potter, and my website is blythepotter.com. And I am seeking the Democratic nomination for Secretary of State next year. So I will need delegates. So if you have questions about my campaign or want to support, head to my website.
Thanks, B. Chris, you got a place where we can find you?
Yeah, I mean, you can follow me on Instagram. I don't post political stuff that much on my Instagram. It's more of a private account. But find me on LinkedIn and connect with me on LinkedIn. Like, that'll be fun. Just look up Christopher Maichin. But if you also look up my name, I have a bunch of different nonpartisan articles out. I worked for the Alliance for Citizen Engagement last year, so I have a bunch of articles on the presidential election and just kind of giving you the fact, being able for you to make up your own mind. So please go check those out. And I just wanted to say thank you to Scott, Blythe, and Brandon, because a lot of time, for one, being able to have the conversation with me, and just because a lot of times people just hearing that they're going to be talking to Democrats or Republicans when you're on the other side of the aisle won't do it, and they're going to be completely resistant to doing it, and that's what hurts us even more, and that's what divides us even more. So being able to have these conversations, being able to disagree, even getting heated and everything like that, we're still going to be able to smile, say, that was a good debate, and be able to go on with our lives afterwards, and still, think of at you guys and people as people, and as human beings. So thank you guys. And
thank you. We're all gonna hug it out here in the end. And no, Chris, really thank you for stepping into the Lion's Den here with
of course, it's like Indiana's version of CNN Crossfire. I love
it. Brandon, how about you, man?
Yeah, no, I just also thank you guys. If it's any consolation, Chris, formidable young Republican was the selling point that got me to join the panel. But so I do a YouTube. That's where most people know me from, Social Society with Brandon Clark. We just hit 20,000 subscribers. So, if you want to join, come
by the
subscribe.
Way. Awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. So if you go there, I have a link tree that'll take you all my other places. I do a podcast. I have a Substack, the People's Pulse, where we do like a newsletter a couple times a week. I have a weekly podcast. It's Uncommon Ground. But like I said, just go to my YouTube. You'll find the rest of my stuff from there. And Scott, thank you again for hosting a really insightful panel.
Absolutely. Love doing these. Love having you guys around. Once again, for those of you who don't know me, my name's Scott Aaron Rogers, and you can find my work at whosleft.us, and I'm on all the social media sites as well, usually at Who's Left, sometimes at my personal handle at ScottRog78. Please follow me, check me out. We're a little bit behind Brandon. We're trying to catch up.
You'll get there. Keep putting content out like this. You'll get there. No doubt.
Appreciate those follows. So in the meantime, I'd like to say thank you on behalf of my guests, Blythe Potter, Christopher Maichin, and Brandon Clark. Until next week, this has been Who's Left. I'm Scott Aaron Rogers. Love each other, Indiana.